this recording.
This meeting is being recorded.
So I will, without further ado, I will pass over to my two officiating colleagues to introduce themselves. Perhaps, Mr. Bell, you would like to go first, please.
That's very kind of you, Mark. It's a long time since somebody called me Mr. Bell. It takes me back to the classroom days, which is a long time ago. Hello, everybody. My name's Alan Bell. I've been asked to do this session to hopefully give a background and provide some ambition for those of you who are in the starting fraternity who may want to move to higher levels and understand a little more of the work and potential that you might get involved with. I'm also really interested to see that so many of our esteemed colleagues from other disciplines are interested in the dark arts of the starting crew. I've been doing this, and I don't mean lecturing, I mean starting. This is my 46th summer season coming up. So I've fired a gun for quite a while, and I've been lucky enough to have progressed to work on some fairly prominent meetings. But I take great joy now, not necessarily from firing the gun, but where I can, helping other people to advance their own careers. That's all I'd like to say at the moment, Mark.
And Mr. Purser, please.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Purser. I'm also a starter. And I've been probably starting now for probably approaching 12 years, maybe. And recently, I've been enjoying working at a high level, in high level competitions under the tutelage of Alan, to be honest. And I've been lucky enough to be given the right opportunities. And yeah, hopefully this evening we'll be able to share some of our knowledge and help you on your way to progression, or at least gain a better understanding of starts and the start teams and how we operate. So yeah, we look forward to your questions.
Right, thank you very much, gentlemen. I will pass over to you now with for the presentation. So give us a couple of seconds. Alan or Mark, are you want to share your screen, or would you like me to do mine?
If you can do yours, Mark, that'd be great, because I haven't got mine set up for that yet. Mark, you've gone very quiet.
It's okay, don't worry.
If I could just, as Mark's doing that, if I could just throw in, what we're trying to do is, Mark and I have negotiated that we'll do this as a double act, and essentially we hope there's a natural point in the presentation over the evening where my element of the work, which is the beginning, sort of synthesizes into the more advanced work that Mark's going to talk about based on his recent experiences particularly. There aren't any rules of engagement, as it were, for the session, apart from one. And that's quite simply, there's no such thing as a stupid question. If you're sitting there in your room somewhere in the United Kingdom, or for I know, anywhere in the world, and there's a point of the discussion that you either don't understand or disagree with, and need extra explanation, please throw it into the conversation. It's really very important that people leave at the end of tonight thinking, well, I've learned something and I feel more comfortable with how that would work. So what we're going to try and do is, if I can get the screen to work, go to the next slide.
You should be able to see the screen, Alan. I can easily change slides if you need.
Right, go next slide, please.
Hopefully it works. It was working earlier. There we go.
There we go. Right, we have four learning outcomes for the next sort of hour and a bit's work. it's fair to say that the two at the beginning, number 1 and 2, are about the experiences that we have day in, day out, the bread and butter athletics at the levels that we all work for most of the summer, or if you're lucky enough to have an indoor facility close to you, for the winter as well. But what's really quite important that you understand is that those principles equally transfer to any standard of athletics that operates anywhere in the world. And we're going to try and demonstrate how we feel those principles transfer. We're going to obviously discuss with you the different personnel within a start team and the roles that each of those people have. And I think significantly, particularly for those of you who are ambitious, how you actually have to adjust what you do according to the numbers that are available in a team. And for some of us, that adjustment doesn't necessarily mean working at a national or international level. It can be, if you're fortunate enough, it can be even at county level. And, you know, I know out there in the wider world that can be difficult. County meetings often are strapped for officials, but I'll give you an example, and I'm fortunate. If you don't know me, I'm from the northeast of England. The Northeastern Counties Championships have 9 level 4 start team members of staff available to staff their county championships indoors and out. So we actually find ourselves every year having 2 people who are on the national list, who are level 4 meeting personnel, who don't get a place at the county championship. Significantly, it does mean in that county, anybody who's aspiring from level 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 has a great opportunity at the county championship to work in what is essentially a very enhanced team. Now, I appreciate, I don't know, that might be unique in the whole of England. It may not be if I think about Greater Manchester, for example. But what we're going to try and show you is how the practices do have to change or be adapted and adjusted when the numbers change. So if we move on to the next slide. Okay, who is in the start team? The 2 that are always there are a starter and an assistant. That is the bread and butter staffing. That is the essential. That is what makes an athletics meeting tick on the track. I cannot overemphasize or underestimate the importance of having those 2 people at any meeting working collaboratively so that a meeting actually, in terms of the track events, runs to time, runs efficiently, but more importantly, runs effectively for the benefit of the athletes. As we move up the different levels of athletics meetings, we can have as many as 3 starters who will act at any particular time as recall starters. I'm going to throw in some recent examples that Mark, I'm sure, will exemplify later. If we take Birmingham recently, there were 4 starters in the start team. So that every race at any real pressure, you had the person with the gun, the starter, but you had 3 other people who would be watching the race from a different perspective, who have the authority and the power to recall the race. As we progress, we would have a team of starters assistants that would be made up of at least 3 people and often up to 4. Their management is in the hands and the gift of a chief starter's assistant. And Mark, I'm sure, will be explaining that role, particularly at major meetings. You see the title Start Coordinator. In the old parlance of when I first got involved, that was known as the chief starter. The person who, as the title now says, coordinates the start team is technically the person in charge. We, the British, are somewhat different from other parts of the world in that a start coordinator in the United Kingdom will also fire a gun. And again, Mark, I'm sure, will talk about different models that he's experienced where he's been, as I have done when I've been at different places around the world. The Office of Start Referee was introduced by World Athletics, amazingly, 11 years ago. And the role is quite simply to ensure that start decisions are correct and fair, and also to oversee the conduct, i.e. the non-technical offences that may be committed by an athlete. In the simplest sense, that's bad language, bad behaviour, or disturbance. Luckily, we don't get much of the bad language. We get very few examples of bad behaviour. We do get quite a few examples of disturbance, which again we'll talk about later. The United Kingdom is very, very different in how we operate start refereeing. Internationally and around the world, the start referee could be anybody. The Americans, bizarrely, usually appoint a track referee. The British, we insist that the start referee should be an experienced starter. And that's something that we hope will be the model that works through from very localized level right through to our major meetings. And the final part of the start team is made up of the technical staff, which most of you won't come across until you get to a fairly high standard of meeting. Probably in the United Kingdom, that might be a regional event such as the Southerns or the Midlands or the North or Scotland or Wales. The technicians or the technical staff might be present at something like, I'll say the Surrey County Championships, because I know they bought a set of equipment, but it depends. But when you go to much higher levels, you're swamped with technical staff, usually from a contractor. Any questions about personnel? Oh, right. Okay, let's just move on then, please, Mark. Okay. I don't apologize for being simplistic. I think it's really important that people understand this, and if you are already an operating start team colleague, look at the language I've used, and does your day-to-day practice as a starting official actually reflect the simplicity of what I'm describing? So the assistant, and at the basic level, one person, you check the people. Have I got the right athletes at the right place with the right number at the right event? That's the people. We check the places. Am I at the right start line? Do I actually have members of the relay team at the right places where they should be? It's down to me as the starter's assistant to ensure that the meeting runs punctually. The timing of the meeting is actually down to me. Somebody produces a program, which, all due respect, at basic level is a wish list. We want the 100 meters to go off at 7 o'clock at night. If it does go off at 7 o'clock at night, it means it's because the assistant has been there and has done the checks correctly, has prepared the athletes, and has actually got everything ready to go so that the starter can then take control. The second principle of practice in a local small team is that the starter's assistant, the person managing that race, will be in the direct line of sight of the starter. We'll exemplify that later with a diagram. We now move on to the starter. You have only one duty. You ensure that the race is fair for everybody on the start line. All of those athletes get a fair start. Now, a fair start is not a good start. A good start is down to the performance of the individual athlete. A fair start is that everybody was, in the judgment of the starter, ready to go. And circumstances around the start did not impinge on the fairness. Circumstances such as adverse noise, or the one that's most common for all of us, particularly on our less well-maintained tracks, a set of starting blocks that slip. You know, that's not fair. And it's up to the starter to ensure that fairness is applied for all. And finally, and what might seem a bit of an obtuse statement to make, but the starter must be in full visual control of the race. Essentially, if it's 100 meters, can I see all 8 athletes? If it's a 10,000 meters, you know, in a local event, can I see all 32 athletes on the split line start in the 10,000? That's probably quite common at local level. So am I taking up the correct position that I can see everybody? Now, that might seem a pretty basic statement. Ladies and gentlemen, if you go to a local meeting in the United States, or you go to a local meeting in France, the 200 meters is started from the middle of the high jump fan. Sorry, yeah, the high jump fan, the pole vault fan, whatever end of the track you have your 200. And I am convinced in most of those cases, the starter can't see either lane 1 or lane 8. Their rationale is because my voice, his or her voice, has to be heard simultaneously by all athletes. The British position, as you all know, would be behind lane 1 in field for a 200. Their argument is there are milliseconds lost when the guy out in lane 8 doesn't hear the gun. The British argument, which I would hope you agree with and would reinforce, is that if you can't see an athlete, you can't ensure fairness. Anybody want to add to that or need further explanation? Anybody want to leave because they don't work that way? No, fine. We'll carry on, Mark, please. So, working from our local county championships right up to international level. Those 2 principles we've talked about previously for each of the roles, always apply them. It doesn't matter where the meeting is, whether it's at the NIA in Birmingham over this winter, or whether it happens to be at the London Stadium for the Diamond League in the summer, or anything in between there. whether it be indoors in Sheffield, indoors in Glasgow, indoors at Lee Valley, whether it be indoors on a straight at Grangemouth or at Gateshead, or any arena that we use outdoors, those basic principles on the previous slide, you should apply. But as you progress and the size of the team becomes bigger, within the team, some leaders will be designated. As we've already indicated, there will be a start coordinator. There will be a chief starter. There will be a colleague who will be nominally in charge of the work of the start team. He or she will define to that team how they want them to operate. There will also be, with more than one starter's assistant, somebody designated as chief starter's assistant. He or she will determine which individual will take charge of which event. So who will be the person who will actually be managing the start of the 100 meters? Will we send someone to the next event to prepare the next race? Will we have 3 starters assistants that will be doing a particular set of duties on a 200? How will we staff a split line start? These are all decisions that will be made by a chief starter's assistant. And in both of those cases, the start coordinator and the chief starter's assistant will design and issue a duty sheet. On a personal basis, I have to say I've always been disappointed. We don't have model duty sheets that are standard across UK athletics. That could be something we should really think about, in my view, so that as people do progress, they're presented with a piece of paper, and what they need to do is look at the information, not interpret how that information is presented. Food for thought. Teams will be briefed, and that briefing invariably will be carried out by the start coordinator. He or she lays down the, well, first of all, the ambiance of the team and the specific needs and requirements of the meeting, some of which might have been dictated to him or her by whoever the meeting belongs to, the ownership. So that could be the promoting organization. At local level, that could be a YDL. As we progress, it could be books. It could be the intercounties. It could be any promoting agency. And then ultimately, as you are an individual coming into one of those teams, new roles will emerge. One of those roles, we've already said, would be that of start referee. At the moment, we use experienced starters. It's fair to say we tend, where we can, to use only senior experienced starters. And that's because the office of start referee is usually only implemented at our quite serious national meetings. Any questions? Okay, Mark, let's keep going. Okay. So if we look at how we progress, the start coordinator is in charge of the whole team. At local level, that's he and me, or she and him, whoever. They will brief the team. Some of that briefing will be based upon information given at a technical meeting. At the very highest level, that technical meeting will be held invariably and often 24 hours before the meeting starts. And I'm sure Mark will talk a little about, in fact, I know Mark will talk a little about some of the issues that come out of technical meetings that do affect start team operation. Chief Starter's Assistant is the link to the start team to other disciplines. So the way we work in the United Kingdom is starters don't have a headset. They already have a headset on, connected to technology and equipment. So the communication technology is actually in the gift of the Chief Starter's Assistant. So they link to not only the rest of the start team in terms of information they might get, but they also link to the other disciplines. If there's a problem with photo finish, often the message will come down through the Chief Starter's Assistant. If there's a message from the technical team, you know, like we've got 2 broken hurdles at position 7, you're going to have to wait 5 minutes till we get some hurdles out of the storeroom. Now, again, that's a simplistic example, but it's the sort of thing that the start team need to know. The call room might have issues around a missing athlete, an athlete who's lost his number, an athlete with illegal shoes that needs to replace them, an athlete who's turned up and not wearing his representative vest, but the referee's given position for him to compete, blah, blah, blah. And finally, traditionally in the United Kingdom, the Chief Starter's Assistant manages DQs, disqualifications. There is one specific reason for that and one reason of efficiency. The specific reason is that the Chief Starter's Assistant is the owner of the paperwork of the event, and so will record the disqualification and log the rule number, and will also have to give that information via walkie-talkie to photo finish and competition direction, because the rule offence needs to be recorded on the result of the event. The efficiency is based upon, if you've got a team of 3 starters assistants, including a chief, and you give the escort duty for the disqualified athlete to the person in charge of the event, there will be a delay until the athlete has been escorted. The Chief Starter's Assistant won't have a duty on a race. And so you can afford to have them absent for 2 minutes to make sure that the athlete who is disqualified leaves the competition area. Not a nice job. It's been given several titles, the walk of death, whatever. The most important thing is that a Chief Starter's Assistant has to apply the rule, but remembering to apply the rule with a significant level of empathy. Somebody leaving the track is going to be angry and undoubtedly upset. The last thing that Chief Starter's Assistant needs to be doing is actually stirring the pot of those emotions. Finally, when in the UK, that link to competition director for televised meetings is absolutely vital. Absolutely vital that you have a situation where upstairs somebody can actually say, hold 100 meters. At major meetings, that changes, that link actually is given to the start referee, and there is a reason for that that will be explained later. So hopefully those notes give you an idea of how the roles progress and how it becomes more complicated, but how it becomes more universal. One of the duties you have as a starting official is to make sure the starts go well. Yes, but you also need to know how your bit fits into the whole picture of an athletics meeting. If you take an athletics meeting as a jigsaw puzzle, what happens at the start line is one piece of that puzzle. And those notes there hopefully will give you an idea of how your piece of the puzzle connects to a number of the others. Can we go again, please, Mark? We go to the start referee. This can either be the easiest job in the world or the hardest. You have one particular duty, and that's to ensure that the starts have been correctly judged. Only intervening when you actually disagree with the start team. Now, frankly, that's damned hard. If you are there as an experienced starter, working with people you undoubtedly know, and you see something at the start, you shouldn't intervene until they have actually made their decision. Because in fact, you might actually agree with their decision, and until it's made, you don't know. What you do is adjudicate on athlete conduct. Now, essentially, that's disturbing a start in all sorts of different ways. But the best example I can give you there is somebody who twitches on the line hasn't started if their hands remain on the ground and their feet don't leave the blocks. But they may well disturb 3 or 4 other athletes who are in the set position. You have to make that decision, often quietly and conveniently with the starter, and agreeing on the decision that someone deserves to be warned for their conduct. The other things are less controversial. Somebody who deliberately delays the start by getting ready slowly and not lining up when told to, going to the set position deliberately late, and thus trying to dictate to you as the starter when you will fire the gun. So that's the office of start referee. For those of you who are there who are really ambitious, you probably won't ever get to work as a start referee till you become old and haggard like me. But, and I think this is really important, moving through start team protocols, you will come across meetings where we have referees, and you need to understand their position and their role. At international level, we have had some difficult situations with start referees who interfere. On a personal basis, Mark might say differently later, I don't know. We had a start referee at the Commonwealth Games, an eminent Australian official who I have to say was brilliant. His total philosophy of how he worked in that office was to make sure that the whole process ran smoothly. And he wanted to enjoy himself in the privileged position he had of being at the start line adjacent to some of the world's greatest athletes. We now move to technicians. Often at domestic meetings in this country, the technicians are our colleagues. So we might have, I'll just use an example. We might have a Peter Schilling operating the SIS at a meeting that we're at. They understand what's going on, but they have no authority whatsoever to actually get involved in decision making. They give information. They provide the technological backup, and they give that information that technology provides to the start team to support and inform decisions. At a much higher level, it's not the likes of Peter Schilling or Alan Bell or Mark Purser or whoever. It's actually people employed by the big boys, Seiko, Omega, or in Europe, Match Sport. Many of whom will actually have never, ever been part of a start team in their life. Okay. Before we go on to the next piece of work, what I need to be able to say there is I hope I've laid out how you would, first of all, at a simplistic level, locally, and probably for most of us, certainly up to county level, you would operate applying certain principles. Those principles are basic, but those principles are well structured to ensure that you are efficient in what you do. I've then tried to give you the basic definition of how those roles are adapted and expand as the work and numbers of a team changes, working through the eminence of the meeting in terms of international priority. Certainly, the latter examples I gave, you will experience regionally in the United Kingdom, definitely nationally, and certainly any meeting with an international importance held in the United Kingdom, including, and I think this is really important to understand, those meetings that we might be running domestically as trials meeting for international events. And the most common one of those is always the England Under-20 Championships, which invariably is our test event and the basis for selecting our teams to go to the World Championships for Under-20s. Now, this is where I lost Mark. Are you going to explain the duty sheets?
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Okay, so that's the end of my bit so far. Hopefully, as we progress, you might come up with some questions and we'll speak later. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Alan. Right. So, as Alan's explained before, the different duties that you have within a team. Now, most of the time when you're working at a local level, it's a small team. So you'll probably find it's one starter, two if you're lucky, starter's assistants the same, one starter's assistant, and again, two if you're lucky, usually at a league meeting. Now the principles of what you do are exactly the same. It's the same job whether you're working, as we said, at a local level or an international level. And if you're lucky enough to go to a county championship, and I'm with Surrey, and Surrey are a big team, and we have the luxury of having a duty sheet on the left there, which encompasses 3 starters assistants. So we have a designated chief, and we have 2 other starter assistants who work under the guidance of the chief. And if you look in the columns on that left-hand sheet, it's pretty standard in its format. I must say there are some regional variations, as Alan said earlier, that there's not a standardized sheet for this. This is a Southern way. It's one that I've been brought up with, handed down by Peter, you know, and adapted. But for us, it works very well. So just reading across on the lines, you've got your event numbers, the time, the event it is, and all the information you need to be able to run the actual event itself. Now, when you come to, if you look on the top row, we've got MP, MC, and CR. They're the actual names of the official. And listed below, you will be allocated a duty for each event. And again, different officials lay things out differently. Just to simplify these ones, if you take T63, the first event, we've got in the first column 1 to 4, which indicates to me that I will be looking after lanes 1 to 4. The next column is C5 to 8, which identifies that official is looking after lanes 5 to 8 and is calling that race. So you will be in charge of that race. Now, if you look down it, it's quite a nice pattern. So you spread the workload, and again, the chief will probably play to the strengths in their team, and just to make sure everyone doesn't get bored with the same job. If you do get to to go to a county meeting and you get to work in a reasonable sized team, it is a very different experience to being out on a cold field on a Wednesday night when it's just you and a starter. So working in a team is great. You share the responsibility. You get a break occasionally as well. And if we look on the right-hand side, there's another duty sheet there, which is taken from an indoor meeting. Again, with the luxury of having 4 starters assistants. And the end column is the chief. And at this level, you can start to replicate what you see at the international level, so that the chief does take a chief role. In this instance, we're able to step back and allow the team to work, so that you can concentrate on managing the team, managing the time, and managing any problems that arise, via a call room or via any start line incidents. And again, the language used in there with CL and Rs and things like that, you do, it's stuff you pick up. And I would say if you're ever presented with a duty sheet, the worst thing you can do is just stare at it and think, I don't know what that means. I'll just carry on regardless. If you're not sure, ask questions. Because when you're on the field of play and suddenly you're confronted with that and you don't know what's going on, then that's not good. So always make sure you ask questions. And as Alan said, there's no stupid question or no silly questions. All right, so just to emphasize on I'm pointing at my screen, you can't see that, I'm pointing. So just to emphasize on those graphics there, so CL would stand for call and line, so you'd be in charge and taking that race to the line. R would mean you're supervising the rear of the line. Again, working at a high level. If you're using SIS equipment where there's technology in the blocks, then the assistant responsible for that would be checking that the athlete's feet are in contact with the blocks, which they have to be in order for the SIS to work correctly. So you depending on the level of meeting you're at, your responsibilities change, but the actual job you do is the same. Okay, any questions on those? If you anything you need highlighting on those? No, good. Okay, move on, please, Mark. Okay, so moving on to the starters, same principles. We again, the graphic on the left-hand side is from a South England meeting. So we've got 3 starters working in a team, and again, the starts are allocated fairly. So you give everyone a variation of starts if you feel the team's up to it. Again, taken by the start coordinator, you draw up a duty sheet based on the starters you're given. And if you are in one of these teams, just share the responsibility. So the straight line starts, make sure everyone gets a share of those, and you don't put everyone or someone just doing 1,500 meter starts or 10,000 meter starts. I mean, all the starts are as important as one another, but you do need a variation to just give people the experience of having different starts. So again, looking at those duty sheets, if we look on, say, the 300 meter hurdles, we've got R1 and R2, which on duty sheets that we use, the R stands for recall. So you're a recall 1 starter and a recall 2 starter. And the actual starter itself in this one is in the middle box there. Again, your chief starter, your start coordinator, will talk to you before the meeting and ask you, what sort of responsibility I'll tell you what sort of responsibility you have. But effectively, you're there, as Alan said, as another pair of eyes on the start, just to ensure all the athletes do get a fair start. If you move down to sort of the 100 meters, then we've got a B in there, which in this instance will stand for blocks. So we have on some tracks you will definitely need a starter, a recall starter if you've got one to look at blocks to make sure they're not slipping. And at a high level, the blocks don't tend to slip on the better tracks with the better blocks, but you're there to to look for any movement for athletes before the start signal from behind. Different levels of responsibility. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, there's a duty sheet that I did for the Diamond League this last summer. And if you look on there, you'll notice, if you compare this to, say, a YDL, if you go to a YDL match, if you're a lone starter, you're probably doing 60 or 70 starts in a day. Okay, they all count. Obviously, they're all important races. But then you come to a Diamond League meeting, you're there for 4 hours, and I think I had the most starts at that meeting, and I did nine starts over that period of time. And the same principles apply. It's exactly the same setup: on your marks, set, bang. But it's just the level of competition and the number of eyes that are upon you. It makes those starts a little bit harder than your regular YDL ones. Again, if you look on there, there's a spread of races, and you try and give everyone a fair allocation of the races you have, the straight line starts, the bend races, and there were some disability races in there as well. So you give everyone a share if you can. Also interesting to note on there is the timings. The timings on there are very exact. If you can see them, the print's a little bit small, but if the race says it's going at 13:02, it's going at 13:02, which is where you need to start your chief starter assistant to be on the ball to make sure their team have the athletes ready on the track, ready for the signal from the competition director, and everything is timed to the minute. And you can see on there as well, you've got the television signals start on there as well. So you need to brush your hair before 2 o'clock, because that's when the international signal starts and you're live to the world. And then from then on, you've got to be on it all the time. And you can see I've got some notes at the bottom there as well, just explaining what we expect each like the recall starters to do. Again, these are examples of working in a team. If you're working at a local level, on your weekday meetings or your weekend league meetings, then you're not going to usually come across a duty sheet like this. And I would suggest you just share the duties between you. If you've got more than one starter, just share the races evenly throughout the evening or throughout the day, just to make sure you mix things up a bit. And again, the starters assistants, one of you could probably try and take charge and just make sure the timetable flows and you're always in the right place at the right time. Okay, next slide, please, Mark. Now, this is a graphic that Alan's very proud of. I don't know how he did it. Personally, I think Leslie did it, but anyway. So if we just use the 100-meter start line as an example of positioning. So pretty standard positioning. We'll go through the ones that we'll use in pretty much every competition. So the big S at the bottom of the screen is the starter. Okay, there's no hard and fast rule as to where you position yourself. And as Alan said earlier, you put yourself in the best position so that you can see all the athletes. As a rule of thumb, between 15 and 20 meters back from the start line and 3 to 5 meters in front of the start line to give you a good view across all 8 lanes. Oh, Mark's gone off piste.
Apologies, there's been a slight technical hitch up. Give me 2 seconds, folks.
There
we go.
So that's a conduct warning for Mr. Ritchie.
It does indeed.
Okay. Yeah, so looking at your positioning there, I mean, again, the geography of the track may stop you from starting there. There's some tracks I know, like if you go to Kingston, for instance, where our county championships are held, you've got no chance of putting a 100-meter start exactly where you want it like that. Otherwise, you'll be on top of the pole vault bed. So you do have to consider, the geography of the track as to where you position yourself. But as Alan said, you always make sure you put yourself in a position where you get the best viewpoint to see everybody and see everybody fairly as well. Now, directly opposite in a green circle is AS1, which Alan's put down as assistant starter 1. But again, at a local meeting, it might just be you as a starter and a starter's assistant. And ideally, that's where you'd like to position yourself as well. So you're just in front of the line, so you can look across the line and see what's happening with the athletes. You've got good line of sight of the starter, and obviously you're there to enable the athletes to line up, or have the athletes lined up and ready to race. Now, as your team expands, then we've got R1 and R2 there, which stand for the recallers. Now, recall 1 traditionally would take a similar line of sight to the starter, whether it be just behind, just in front, obviously just to the side, because you don't want to be directly in line of sight. Excuse me. And then if you've got another luxury of having a second recaller. Now, choice of options there. You can either put the recaller on the other side of the track, or you can have that recaller standing behind, looking at the athletes from the back. My wife's just bringing me a glass of water. Thank you, both. Oh, that's better. Right. Again, looking on the green symbols, with 2 additional assistants, started assistants. The position there, Alan's put them there to show an international meeting. They will walk across the back of the blocks to make sure that the athletes have their feet in contact with the blocks during the start. But they will make themselves scarce after they've checked. They move out the line and away. What we don't show there is a chief starter assistant who, if they've got these people in place, then they will be to the side, just overseeing everything. Again, making sure everything looks good. They've got in contact on the radio if there's anything needs to be seen, or any comes down from a competition director, or for whatever reason, TV say hold the race. And again, it does happen at the national level as well. We do have these officials in place, and again at county championships and regional level, you will experience bigger teams. So you will be in a team of 3 or 4 people. Just a couple of additional boxes there. The start referee is signaled in the middle in the grey box. Again, they have a similar line of sight to the starter, and they just position themselves where they can see pretty much what the starter sees. And the EQU box is the equipment. So if you've got technology in the start line with SIS, etc., which is a start information system, then they are positioned close to the starter, obviously, and generally very close to the start line as well. Okay, any questions on the positioning? Any queries as to who goes where? No news is good news. Okay, next slide, please, Mark. Okay, so this is probably a setup most of you are familiar with. If you're working at local level, it's just you as a starter standing there, and on the far side of the track is a starter assistant. The actual equipment being used, you may not have come across. We have the luxury of using this SIS equipment in the south, which is very nice. But traditionally, you'd be on a podium with a gun, but not in this instance. So you can see where you are. If you compare it to that diagram we just looked at, your starter is there. It's got a good line of sight of all the athletes. Pretty much, I'd say, it's probably about 15 meters back and about 5 meters in front. And on the far side of the track is it's a starter assistant in a good view of the starter and a good view of the athletes as well. Because that's pretty. Who's familiar with that setup? I'd imagine most people will put their hand up to that one and say, this is what I do on a daily basis. There's nothing wrong with it. Again, the principles are the same. The start line here is exactly the same as it is at the Commonwealth Games. There's just more people involved, but the principles are exactly the same. Okay, Mark, thank you. The live action. Okay, so if we compare what we saw there to if we go up to an international level, into a championship start team, you can see here this is a start line from the 100 meters in Munich this year just gone. And if you look in the bottom left hand corner, in the very bottom left, again I'm pointing at my screen, you can't see, we have a recaller. That's him. Yep. Okay, and in front of him we have a starter's assistant. Okay, on the other side of the track we have another that's another recaller at the back there, and that's another starter's assistant there. Now this was a German team. They work slightly differently from the UK team, but essentially all works the same way. Okay, again, as well as regional variations in Britain, there are international variations as well, and all teams essentially do the same. They just rotate some of the roles differently, but yeah, we've got 2 starters assistants and two recallers there. That's just on that side of the track. If you next slide, Mark, please. Okay, so again, the same start. In the middle there, we've got the starter on the podium, which you can see. In the middle, we have to the right of the starter, we have the start referee. That's right, which is Chris Cohen. If you saw him in Munich during the summer, spent most of his time on Chris Cam, talking to the cameras. And to the left of the starter, we've got the technology provider there, and they've got a little monitor in front. There's a couple of technology providers there. And I've also got the start coordinator that we had in the middle there. That's right. Again, the start coordinator in this instance didn't do many starts throughout the 6 days we were there. She mostly took control of the team, including the starter's assistants. Again, that's another way teams operate internationally. But she did do some starting as well. But essentially, she was there to oversee everything. Now, if you compare that to what we saw just now with one starter assistant, and now we're into 9 people in the team, it's the same job. We were doing the same job. We were starting the same race. The positioning is the same commands. All it is just going up through the levels, and all of a sudden you've got a 100-meter final in front of you, as opposed to a 100-meter local league race. But yeah, the athletes are all there wanting the same starts, and the job you do is exactly the same. Okay, any questions on the setup there? Sorry, Peter, I did see your question about EQU. That was equipment, that meant for the SOS equipment. Okay, any other questions on those? Okay, let's move on, Mark. Okay, so when it all comes together, this is what we get. Okay, so that was Commonwealth Games 100-meter men's final from the summer just gone. Margaret worked on the stand, and again we were all there as a start team. There are 4 of us starters with the start referee. And what you can't see on that picture is the SAS equipment, which in that race didn't work. Which I don't know how many people knew that. The SAS decided to pack in about 2 minutes before the start of the race. So we had a big discussion about that one, and we went without it, and it was just all down to what we saw. And luckily, it was not luckily, because it was Margaret on the stand. It was a great start, and I think that probably covers most of what we were going to do. So happy to take any questions about what you've seen.
Okay, ladies and gents, I'm sure Alan and Mark are not too shy enough to answer any questions you have. So please do not hesitate to ask any questions you may wish to do so. If you want to pop your hand, use the hand function on the Zoom, or you can wave your hand and I will hopefully be able to identify you. I was about to say, Alan, you've just got off scot-free, and Peter puts his hand up. Peter, over to you.
Two Peters, actually.
Yeah, it's great.
Thanks. I'm very glad that no questions are stupid. You're probably about to hear one. Alan, you were talking very eloquently about twitching and the communication between the start referee and the starter. I just wondered if you could elaborate on that slightly. I'm lucky enough to be in the workshop that Mark was running at the Southern Officials Conference the weekend before last, and there's quite a lot of talk about that. But if you have a different view to the starter, but the starter's gone, what can you do about it then? Maybe I've misunderstood somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Not a problem, Peter. First of all, there are various offences that the start referee can adjudicate on that are known as the conduct warnings. Now, the simplest ones are invariably those that involve an athlete delaying. And the delay can be a variety of things. It can be simply just not going to their marks when they're told. And in my career, I had a very famous occasion when a French lady hurdler decided to let all 7 athletes get on their marks before she even moved. And it was a deliberate ploy to create some unrest. Now, that's a fairly obvious delay. The other thing that is a delay is quite often when you say set, it's whether the athlete comes up to the set position immediately or slowly or continuously moves or comes up late. Now, that's usually the position where the starter would ask them to stand up if he or she's not comfortable with what has happened, and talk to the start referee and say to the start referee, or ask the start referee, I think lane 2 was playing silly devils and was deliberately coming up slowly so that all of the others would have to wait. Now, in my experience, I've never been in a position where a start referee has disagreed with my opinion as the starter. And that's not because it's Alan Bell, it's because you as the starter form the best opinion as to actually whether there's unity amongst the 8 athletes. Is that making sense to you? Right. The issue of whether there's a twitch or there's a first movement, when there is a twitch and athletes go, usually it's before the gun. An athlete will twitch, the others will go, and so there's never an issue around having to recall a race or frankly a race finishing. The start referee can, if the race starts and the race is completed and the start referee is not happy with the start and has evidence to prove it, they can actually retrospectively disqualify an athlete. But you must have evidence. That would only happen at a very, very senior event where you've got SIS in place or video footage. You're a senior field official. You will know that now we have a camera watching every takeoff in the long jump in a video room. And the video referee often would call no jump for a particular jump that, for a trial that the judge at the board may well have thought was legal. So it's exactly the same system. The referee at the start line with the correct evidence can retrospectively disqualify. Conversely, and I think this is really important that all our colleagues understand this, and I don't know whether Mark's ever been in a position where this has happened. It's only happened to me once internationally. If the starter and the start referee disagree, the start referee has a variety of options. 1, to change their mind. 2, to enforce their opinion. Or 3, allow the athlete to run what's known as under protest. Then look at the evidence afterwards and then make the decision. Now, an obvious one there could be, this is where it happened to me once, and it should never happen, but it did. The printer ran out of ink in the SIS printout, and we actually didn't have the evidence. I started a race, thought it was legal. I didn't get the bleep in my ear, so I didn't stop it. The starter referee wasn't comfortable with it. In retrospect, neither was I, and we couldn't actually get a printout. And so when the printer was then given ink, we got a printout which actually showed that the athlete went legally. It was 0.11. So for those of you who don't understand this, that's 1,000th legal. So the referee has that ultimate power. It's no different, if I can use this as a comparison. When you're field referee at an event, essentially you don't ever judge a performance. You are the point of appeal where you can overturn a field judge's decision. Exactly the same as a track referee can overturn the decision of a track umpire. The start referee has exactly the same office on the start line. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Alan. Peter Schilling, are you next, sir?
Yeah, only just to give a point of information that I'm told by UKA, and we've been talking about the using the SIS equipment. I've been told by UKA that it's broken at the moment and it's not going to be available during the indoor season, unfortunately. Although things may happen and miracles might happen. And on the second thing, an observation, it's very nice to see a large number of ladies on air tonight who hopefully will be aspiring starters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And Jane Holding, have you got your question?
Hi there. Hopefully an aspiring starter. Could you please clarify for me, because it seems to be a bit woolly, the people I asked, I'm not sure. So I'm currently level 1 starter assistant. I understand that if you're heading down the starter route, you need to bear the levels of starter assistant and the starter bit. What exactly is needed if you're looking to go down the route of both? And what's the difference if you're looking to be purely a starter's assistant, but not doing the starter bit? Does that all get a bit complicated?
Alan, would you like to go?
No, I'll leave that to Mark as a COPSEC.
Okay, so if you're a level 1 starter's assistant, you can progress through the levels purely as a starter's assistant. So you do your 4 to get your level 1, you do your 10 to get your level 2, etc., and going through. If you do want to be a starter as well, then you have to do both. You do have to do both disciplines. So you need to do, Mr. Ritchie may correct me on this, but you do need to do your 4 as a starter and your 4 as a starter assistant to progress, and the same with the level 2 qualification as well, and going forwards. So yeah, you can do a standalone starter assistant, which it never used to be, which is a great opportunity now for people who don't want to be a starter. and don't want to use guns, or you can do both. But if you are a starter assistant, you can always go back and do the starter, and then work your way up through levels again, just as you did for the starter assistant course as well. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, it does. It's the questions, isn't it, for level 2 on both, as it is for everything else as you progress, isn't it? You have those specific. You have to have your reports done at level 2 with the questions. Is that right?
Yeah, there are questions to answer for level 2, and again, if you're only doing the starters assistant course as opposed to the starters one, I think, Mark, I'm right, you only have to do the starters assistant questions.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Sam's shaking her head like she did both, but okay. I mean, it's great to have an understanding. If you can answer both sets of questions, it's all great knowledge going forward. So yeah,
Somebody was saying that the starters level 2 questions were exactly the same bar 2 questions as the starters assistant level 2, and I just wanted to know where I can actually where do I locate those to start working on those. It always gets a little bit woolly at this point, and I haven't found anyone yet who says, right, this is what you got to do, this is where you find it, this is what you get going with. That's what I wanted to just
luckily Mr. Ritchie is here.
So yeah, I'm happy to take that offline, Jane, and I'll send a link to everyone just to kind of where you can find such resources.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Any additional questions, ladies and gents? I know we've kind of slightly run over time tonight, but I think I'm sure you'll all.
I think Donna has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, apologies, Donna. I was just about to say it. I saw that there.
Sorry. Actually, just to Alan, I like the diagram that you did with the start and where the starters assistants are and what have you. Have you also got one for the for non-sprint races, for like 15, 3Ks, etc., etc.? Because there's a timekeeper's tutor, and online in particular, that would be really, really useful.
It's a great question, Donna. Great question.
Well, yeah, thanks, Donna. That's a really great end to the evening. Do you know how long that, excuse my French, bloody drawing took me to do? No, well, so you gather by that answer I haven't.
No.
Okay, you've now set me a challenge. I'll try. All right.
That'd be lovely. Could you send me the one that you've got? Yeah,
my technology skills are improving, but they're still a long way behind my 16-year-old granddaughter. So she may well have to come in and do a little bit of support on Grandad. I'll try.
I appreciate it. Thank you. That's all.
I think that's your social life, Alan, just been taken up.
Yeah, looks like it. Yeah.
But yeah, if anybody has any additional questions, I'm kind of going through to make sure I'm not missing anyone. But I know we've gone slightly over tonight, ladies and gents, but I'm sure you'll agree that the breadth of material covered by Alan and Mark tonight was very thorough and very educational. So on behalf of us, I'm sure on behalf of all attendees and myself, Alan and Mark, thank you very much for creating this, and thank you very much for presenting tonight. Just to kind of round off, like I say, I'll send a link, an audio link to tonight's recording, and a link to the various resources, including Jenny links to kind of questions and such like. But thank you very much, ladies and gents, for attending this evening, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mark. Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.